Okay, it's the top of the hour, and I respect that you are here on time. So we will get started, and anyone who joins later will be joining hopefully very soon, including my fellow panelists. And I don't see any note. Last time I got some emails that people, for some reason, could not access the meeting. But today, seems everything is okay and working. So without further ado, let me share my screen. Welcome again. And let's just go straight. Let me hide my view of people because it's blocking slides. So today is our last but one session, and we are going to talk about generating and maintaining records. Sounds like a boring topic, right? But as you know from any audit, any inspection, and also for internal company uses, there are many records that, first of all, some of them have to be generated, and two of them, second, many of them are important for the company, for review, for analysis, for improvements, for documenting important decisions, and so on and so forth. So first of all, let me recap again our typical exam writing tips. As you probably remember, there are 165 multiple choice questions. 15 of them, nobody knows which ones. I mean, nobody like me, you, your colleagues taking the exam, we do not know which ones are not scored. They are not first 15 or last 15. They will most likely be scattered across all of them. You have 3.5 hours, less than 2 minutes per question, which is quite short a time. Some questions would be easy, pretty straightforward. Some may need additional thoughts, or read it twice before I really am sure what the question is about. People who don't have English as their native language, they can buy additional time. The cost is not huge. Even now, after the applications are closed, you can still do that if you reconsider your initial decision. Just you need to email SQA and ask for this additional time to be accommodated for your exam. So don't think that you missed the opportunity. Until you go to sit for the exam, there is a chance. Practice exam, as outdated as it is, but at least it's now free of charge, and it can give you some hint how the questions may be looking like, what kind of answers are typically provided, what are the options. Many times you would see I can exclude straight away one or two of them, which gives me fewer choices. And then if I'm really not sure, I can guess or leave it for later and see maybe some other question will guide me to the right answer, will give me a hint. Before the final submit, you can even correct your initial answer. But don't think about it way too much unless you are clearly aware that you were just guessing and you are now more sure how to answer. The exam covers FDA 21 CFR, ICH E6, and still it's the R2. R3 hasn't been officially released as step 4 by ICH, and meaning also not adopted as step 5 by the regulators. And 21 CFR Part 11 related to electronic records and electronic signatures. You have your candidate handbook. It's a very useful resource. Read it, read the references that might be there, not to memorize them, but to have an idea. And when you read any regulation, any guidance document, read the preambles. That drives the interpretation, what is expected, what is the purpose of having this guidance document or regulation. So the preambles are not just things to be skipped, but they can give you some really useful framework for understanding. Answer the questions based on the most conservative approach. This is not necessarily the same thing you do at your company, but this is the expectation and the safest way to answer the questions in the exam. Read the tips of your peers, but don't let be swayed from your own working methods of preparing, of thinking about the exam, of your exam strategy, and so on. It's good to know how other people see it, but if you have something that works great for you, keep it. That's the best thing. You should feel as comfortable as possible when you go for the exam, instead of trying to adopt all kinds of different advices and tips, and finally you may get confused or feeling stressed. Read the questions always very carefully. Don't skip, as we tend to do, little words like no or not expected. That happens very often to me as to anyone else. Watch your time. There is a timer on your screen when you are sitting for the exam. So that would be helpful, because you might not be allowed to take your wristwatch, you might not be allowed to have your phone in front of you for timekeeping. So use the timer on the screen, whether you take the exam from home or whether you are sitting at the testing center. Watch for keywords and their matching. If some answer is clearly contradicting the scenario provided or the question, it's very unlikely that's the correct one. Use logic and common sense, and also your initial instinct, since you are experienced, will be guiding you most likely the correct way. So what would be your instant thought? And you may be thinking like, I don't like any of these answers. None of them seems really the perfect answer to me, because I would take part of this and part of this, or I would phrase it completely differently. That happens. The wording, the answers, the wording of the question may not be the one you would have chosen, but try to match it and to think about it in terms of process or procedure. Imagine yourself in the situation. Say, if there is something about audit, you are the auditor doing it and you are seeing that situation. What would you do about that? Don't second guess your answers, not at least not too much, because that happens to anyone. And I happen to do the same thing. My first answer is correct. Then I start reanalyzing and re-examining, and finally I end up with the wrong one. At least that's my experience for all kinds of quizzes and tests, either for fun or for work. Since we are talking about generating and maintaining the records, so what does it mean? It includes processes for physical capturing and documenting observations, comments, recommendations, actions, and quality assurance activities. Physical capturing doesn't mean pen and paper, wet ink. It's record, and that would be the term that would replace document in GCP-R3, as you will see it once released. That refers either to electronic record or to paper-based record. So it doesn't matter which media is used to create the record. Could be even video recording, picture, photograph. Record is anything that supports what is done. It's part of documentation. We have audit-generated records, meaning my audit plans, observations, notes, reports, certificates, correspondence, CAPA I may be reviewing or outlining for the auditee. I would always prefer the auditee to say how they are going to handle the observation or finding. My notes are not necessarily public document For me, I keep my notes inside my audit reports. That's my preference and transparency in front of my clients. In your company, if you are an employee, you may do it completely differently. But my advice is do not discard your notes hastily, because they may help you if there are later on questions. And for me, the note is in a way a kind of source document, because that's where I'm capturing my thoughts, my observation, my additional questions. I may be using color fonts to differentiate. I may be using highlights to make things easier. So keeping good audit notes, that would be a topic on its own, and we don't have a training session on that now. But be creative and use it, to be able to find out things quickly, group things that belong together, make it practical for yourself. Quality training, staff development activities, it's another group of records. Regulatory official site visits and inspections, trend analysis records of audit observations, CAPAs, and so on. Issues and their trends over time, and communication is required by the quality system that typically differs slightly from one organization to another, depending on your structure, depending on your manpower, and so on. In large organizations would be different from very small ones. And always keep in mind that these rules apply to electronic, paper, and hybrid records, which may have some similarities and some differences. If you have electronic records and they are supposed to be signed and filed or even submitted, then think about the 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. If you have a paper record with wetting signature, you don't have to bother about this, since it applies only to electronic records. Many companies have most likely hybrid records. Some may be still sitting on paper, some may be electronic. Not all companies are 100% digital and online. So depending on your organization, just make sure that you do not mix up the rules for different records depending on the way they are captured. Very brief document or record management lifecycle. Remember that it starts at the creation or receipt. I may be the author or I may be the recipient. Then it's the distribution, use, active storage while the record is being used in a live project. Then inactive storage, retention. Sorry, there is a typo, but this is a picture, so it's my typo and I cannot correct it. Disposition, archival, and preservation. So some records might not be needed long term. We can dispose them. Some might be needed and might be stored and preserved for prolonged periods of time. But always think about, let's not generate records just to have records and to say we have many. What is the purpose? Is it required by regulations? What is the criticality? If this record is missing, how bad is it? Did it document an important decision? Or was it just a note from a conversation that is captured elsewhere? What is the classification of the record, especially if your organization applies the record classification? You may have records that are confidential, restricted, internal, or public. So make sure that you follow these rules per your organization policies. We want to see the records to maintain and be compliant with RQAP+. We need the process that preserves the integrity of the record. Meaning, what is the integrity of the record? If the records are exchanged between different parties within the same organization or outside the organization, and perhaps going back after some updates, then integrity means that nothing important from the record has been lost, has been corrupted, unintentionally deleted, that a scan, if I make a scan, is legible, it's good quality. So the record should give me the ability to reconstruct certain activity or its outcome or part of the process. We may use certified copies, as you know, instead of original records. I would be careful with this. I've seen companies that say, we scan the source documents, for example, like sites, and then we discard all originals because the originals were on paper, and then our scans don't take physical space. Has anybody reviewed it in between the creation, certified copy, and the disposition of the origin? Is there a possibility that something has been updated on a paper record which is not captured on a scanned document? So there are additional thoughts, and there should be additional processes or quality checks to make sure we really have records that preserve their integrity. For electronic records, we need to maintain audit trails, documentation of audit trail reviews. Audit trail is pretty much a standard thing in our area of work, but documentation of audit trail reviews, that might be a tricky thing. So do you need to have an Excel sheet to document it? Can you document it inside the system itself, like ETMF, for example, that it has been reviewed? Do you have the capability or anyone else in your organization to have a tick box and to check it when something is reviewed? How often is it reviewed? And version control, authorship, review, and approval. If everything is done by the same person, I would not call it a good record. Review, I can do my self-check, my self-QC, but for any kind of like SOP, if I have the author, the reviewer, and the person who approves the same person, I would question the logic of this process. Then you would be doing compliance review of yourself. You will be auditing yourself. As auditors, you know that the auditor should be independent from the activity being audited. That's why, as I have one-person company, I don't have any SOPs. Sometimes my clients are questioning it, and when I explain it, I've never faced a rejection. So everything needs to have a good rationale behind that. Availability of effective records at the point of use for organizations. If we have SOPs, but these SOPs are for people to follow, do they easily access the SOPs from their workplace, from the bench, from the desk, from the site they are working at, or auditing, from any remote area? Or is it restricted and I need to go back? And in that case, there is a risk of deviations because I can't remember everything. The validation of systems generating electronic records, that would be a big chapter itself. Backups, retrievals, protection, cybersecurity protection, like who can edit, who can view only, meaning these are the credentials and privileges associated with particular user accounts. Retention period change management, that should be planned. There should be a risk assessment. There should be impact assessment. There should be a decision saying, yes, change is approved. And finally, yes, the change is now being made effective. And I always put this warning, emails are not suitable records of decisions. Emails are actually not records that can be used easily for any regulated purposes. One thing, it's very difficult to find a decision. Imagine a study and how many emails are generated during that. Emails are communication tools. So updates, notifications, and so on and so forth, summaries, but not decisions, and not the place where to put like approval, for example, that the medical monitor approved an exemption to inclusion-exclusion criteria. If it's an email, that would be a disaster. Try to find it 10 years later. I practically guarantee you wouldn't. So there should be, if there is an important decision to be captured, form, not note to file. A form specific for the purpose, that also is designed to fit the purpose. And where can go processes wrong? Well, anywhere. But the consequences could be painful. Disclosure of confidential information, breaches, leaks that can be very expensive, especially if we are in the EU area and following the GDPR. Or verification is not possible. Filing is rejected. If you read the recent warning letters, many of them are related to poor documentation and inability for the regulators to evaluate what has been done, how, by who, and so on. Deviations and non-compliance, premature loss or damage or destruction of records, which could be a disaster. Very short example, I was tasked by a client to audit a study that was completed 10 years ago. It was a bioequivalence study. And they wanted to know if all the records are in a good shape, since their monitoring at that time was deficient and they knew that. And the second question, even more difficult, was last year there was a new regulation released related to acceptance of bioequivalence study results. Supposing that this regulation was in effect 10 years ago, would that study be compliant? That's quite tricky. And also, since it's 10 years ago, it expects the auditee to be able to provide me with complete study documentation, ideally in electronic format, that I don't need to leave my office and I can use my time effectively to review what I need to review. And if I need to sit until 3 o'clock in the morning, I can sit until 3 o'clock in the morning. The auditee was pretty amazing because they scan, yes, they have paper records, but they also have a backup scan, and the scans were perfect quality. All the chromatograms, everything was absolutely clear. So I was quite impressed by the quality of the documentation, by the speed they provided any additional documents requested during my review. So good documentation, you never know when in the future it might be requested and what future need of your that time client or sponsor or any important stakeholder may ask you, can you go back to those records? Inspection can ask for a study completed years and years ago, and it happens. And then, how did you document this decision? Where it is? What was your rationale? People who are there at that time might not be around. So being able to find out what I need and find it promptly needs good record-keeping system, good filing system, and good traceability. So if we don't have that it may damage reputation, erode trust, cause financial loss, may drive companies out of business. So documentation and records and their good quality are absolutely essential. And as you know, it's one of the objectives of GCP. Why do we have GCP? One, to protect the participants. It's very important that rights, safety, their well-being. The second is to ensure that the outcomes of the study, supported by the relevant records, are good enough to reconstruct what was done, how it was done, and to make informed decision. Is this drug going to be marketed, or is it going to be dumped, and the sponsor would receive a letter, please repeat your study and resubmit if you want us to review and make a decision. And that happens. I can read it in some summaries I'm receiving every now and then, like the FDA review asked for additional study, additional documentation, additional analysis. If they were not done, do a new study. So if something is not done and planned properly in the first place, that can delay the way of the product to the market, that can delay the access of patients who are waiting for that. And that's what we don't want. We want safe and effective medicinal products for consumers. And make sure that we can prove that what we say we did, we really have evidence that nobody can refute. Let's now move to our practice exam and discussion questions. There are not many, and we have one scenario that I prepared just for the interest of the discussion on sharing our opinions. Do I have anyone from my fellow panelists, please? Because I do not see the participants since I'm presenting. Pam sent me the email that she would be able to join. Let me see if I can draw the participants. And I'm afraid I'm left all alone. Well, let's handle it as best as we can. Hope you are not going to be bored. This is a very easy one. Certified copy means, and you select one, copy that has been verified to have the same information as the original, a duplicate of an original record, a printout of an electronic medical record, a copy of the original that has been signed by the principal investigator. So in the chat, write your choice, and I try to pull the chat to see the answers in the same time. I see one. So far, so good, or ones. Any other opinion? Let's give it a few more seconds. Can 3 be included? Good question, and we will get back to that. So basically the answer is a copy that has been verified to have the same information as the original. That's from the glossary of GCP. But let's take a look, printout of an electronic medical record. I would at least expect to accept it. It will be reviewed and signed. Then it means a copy could be a printout that has been verified to have the same information. And I would expect that someone confirms I verified it, and I attest it's a true record that has exactly the identical information. Without that, if I cannot really link it to a time point, or I can have doubts, perhaps something was updated, or I find a missing field, like imagine lab reports from the electronic medical records. Some results take longer than others to be produced by the lab. So if I have an EMR printout and I see still some missing parts, then I would be thinking most likely it might have been updated. Or was it really missed? Was it not done? And it would immediately raise some doubts about the completeness of this record. And I have no way to have a kind of assurance that somebody verified it, that somebody now attests that it's true and complete. If they are assigned with electronic signatures, I mean, if it's signed wet ink, a printout could be also print into Microsoft PDF. It's not necessarily a physical printout, a paper. It could be any other kind of electronic printout if I call it this way. I may print as Adobe document. I may print it as a JPEG, as PNG image. The format can be either electronic or could be printed out on paper. But this or that way, I would expect that somebody declares that I have verified it and the information is complete, and here is my signature and date or timestamp. And then I would be pretty much happy to accept it. But without anything else, if it just say printout, can I be sure? Maybe yes, maybe I have doubts, and maybe I would clearly expect that there should be an update. So it depends also on the type of the record, and look at it from the RQA lens. Is it complete? Is it attributable? Can I see if I have, for example, the metadata information together with the printout, especially electronic printout, that tells me when the record was made, who made it, when it was generated. That's a different story than to have a printout on paper from a printer, and I have no chance to capture the metadata. So I cannot assign it to a person. Okay, so here we go. Let's move to the next one. Source documents. In applying the RQAP principle to source documents, everyone involved in the clinical trial, monitors, auditors, assistants, you name it, should ensure that these records are. And now you have some confusing changes of word: attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. Attributable, lean, contemporaneous, obscure, and accepted. Attributable, legal, correct, observed, anticipated. Attributable, legitimate, comprehensive, outstanding, and authorized. I believe the answer is very easy, even if you don't remember it from the acronym itself. And sometimes I stumble a little bit. Then some of these words in these potential answers clearly tell you this is not a correct answer. Excuse me. So let me see the chat and jump to the last. And it's 1-1. Any other opinion? Well, you are right. It indeed is 1. And you may have also RQAP+, and additional things defined. So it's not only these, but we stick here for the RQAP. Documentation of roles and responsibilities at site. Where are they documented? And I would really allude that the form itself could be named differently in different organizations, not necessarily exactly the same term, but basically, is it CV of the personnel, list of appropriately qualified persons who are delegated trial-related duties, whatever we call this list, the monitoring visit reports along with FDA 1572, and the 1572 that is required for any trial under an IND, investigation of new drug application. Let me again jump to the chat to see the answers. So far, I see twos. No adoption. But I see only 2 or 3 people active, and we are 14 on this call. I am not answering, and Lydia is not answering. So I would expect something like 12 answers. Give it a try. This, I'm not judging you. So yes, the list of appropriately qualified persons who are delegated trial-related duties. The CV does not have the study-specific delegation, of course, so it cannot be. It's very clear and very easy. Monitoring visit reports, well, although there might be some explanation of who does what, it's not really the allocation, and I've never seen a monitoring visit report where it exactly says that this person is delegated task 1 to 6, then 7, then 10 to 12, or whatever. Never ever in my life. And 1572, that's the statement of investigator. That's not a delegation of responsibilities. And not every study uses FDA 1572. One, it has to be IND study. Not every study is IND. And even if it's submitted to the authorities, if it's submitted in Europe, there is no 1572 that would apply. Next. During a review of investigational product accountability, the following documentation was available at the site. Sent to site, 50 capsules. Distributed to study participants, 40 capsules. Returned to the sponsor, at the end, 5 capsules. What other documentation would allow you, sorry about the background noise, somebody needs to know that everybody around in the neighborhood is hearing their passing by, would allow you to perform full drug accountability. You are auditing the site. The information that is in the scenario is not complete. So you would need a record of investigational product destruction, you select one, and verbal response by the study coordinator, verbal response by the study coordinator and certificate of analysis, a record of the number of capsules returned by the participants and the certificate of analysis, and finally, the fourth option, a record of investigational product destruction, and a record of the number of capsules returned by the participants. So let me again jump to the chat to see your options. Think about it. This is not that straightforward, but I see so far 4, 4, and 4, and 4. Okay, anybody willing to explain why you have chosen 4? Just unmute yourself and feel free to speak.
Well, I would say this is a new and to get the full destruction. So not only are you trying to account for those 5 capsules, but there may be more that are missing if there were any returned by the patients or the subjects. And so you need both sides of that. That's why I chose 4.
Mm-hmm. Because from this, we do not know the rules for the return. Meaning, is it only intact package? And what kind of product it is? Because if, for example, if we think about chemotherapy, then if the packaging has been open, and even if it hasn't been administered, that packaging is not going to be kept and returned because it's a toxic substance. So that's one thing. The other thing, what is sent to the site, meaning provided, should equal the number of units, whatever they are, distributed to participants, returned by participants, including empty packaging, and for that might be a destruction record. Were there any, let's say, if I have a blister and the whole packaging returned has 2 tablets that were returned by the participant, then these things maybe were destroyed at the site. So that would be the site distraction part. And also, from the inspector point of view, what the sponsor did with these 5 capsules. Of course, the numbers are very simplified for easy math. You never see 5 capsules written the sponsor. The shipping cost would not justify any kind of benefit of sticking to this procedure. So that's just fun to have easy calculation. But you see, I have sent to site 50, distributed 40, return to sponsor 5. Where are the missing 5? Right? Because 40 and 5 is 45, but I sent 50. So what happened to this 5 that I am missing in my equation? Were they destroyed at the site? What happened to them? And if I want to have a full picture, I also want to see the sponsor record of destruction, if there is any return, because unless there is an agreement that these can be used further or distributed by third-party organizations, if it's still fit for use, if it's a marketed product, sometimes they may be distributed in low and middle income countries as a donation under some rules. And I'm just applauding to such kinds of decision because it always hurt me to see the waste. But somewhere I have flying 5 capsules and I don't know what happened to them. So I want to see the record of the number of capsules returned by the participants. Maybe they forgot something. They were traveling and forgot the packaging. That happens in every single study where the patients take the product at home.
The question 2 says, what other documentation would you allow? And number 1 and number 2 say a verbal response. That's not documentation.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you kind of rule those 2 out automatically.
Yeah. And a certificate of analysis
has nothing to do.
Anything about the quantity? No, it tells me about the composition of the product and that it was produced and that it contains certain amounts, micrograms, milligrams, nanograms, whatever of this and this and this and that, and that it conforms to some standards. So it's basically the only possible answer is the last one. Moving to the next one. GCP compliance. So prior to participating in a clinical trial, a potential study participant was instructed by the study coordinator to begin the washout of a prohibited medication. The participant was then told they will sign the informed consent, should be there, would sign, but it's copy-paste, I swear, the informed consent form at the next visit. What key element of the informed consent process was missing? The options are there should be a blood work done prior to washout, the ICF should be fully executed prior to implementation of the washout, the principal investigator should have a discussion with the participant should have drawn a line through the current medication requirement and updated the form, whatever form it is. So your choices, again, simple logic, you get it. And I see twos and twos. Of course, it's two. There is no other possible answer. Again, we all know that the informed consent should be fully executed prior to implementing any study-specific procedure. And I'm stressing this study-specific for a reason. Especially, let's say, oncology sites. They say any patient coming to our site has blood count down and has, for example, CT scan or ECG, anything. It doesn't matter if the patient goes to a study or not. That's default. That's our procedure for every single patient. for the doctor who will see the patient to have some basic information. That's not study specific in this case. And if the investigator says, I will complete these things per our typical hospital standard procedures, and then if I see no particular violation, I will further start discussing the study with the participant and then move to the study specific examinations. That's fine with me. But there should be a policy or a hospital SOP and a standard of care. For example, they may call it therapeutic protocols, where these things should be described. And it should really apply to any patient. If it's only for potential study patients, I would question whether it's really their standard procedure, or if it's potentially doing a kind of pre-screen that might be for ethical reasons, saying not to raise hopes for a potential treatment or study participation as an option for therapy to a participant who would very clearly be disqualified because their liver function tests are sky high and they cannot be included. I understand the ethical concern, but also we need to understand the compliance concern, and we should find a way to reasonably reconcile these two without violating one or the other. That's not always easy. Now, this is my discussion question. You are auditing an ongoing study at a research center, and you observe, that's what I really see, that's taken from one of my audits done within the past 2 years. You observe that the investigator trial master file, I call it this way since GCP does not differentiate. Trial master file is one in disparate locations. And now R3 will be allowing, like in brackets, typically called ISF. So I do it the same way here. It's kept at the archive made by the appointed archivist. Any study team member who wants to access the documents need to complete a request form, hand it over to the archivist. The Research Center QA explains that the documents generated in the study, such as logs, forms, performed patient visits, were checked by the clinical QC person, reviewed by the QA, and they want to ensure the quality of documentation, that nothing is accidentally lost, altered, and so on. My question is, what do you think about such a practice? And since I want to have a better interaction with you, I'm going to stop sharing here where you have some resources. And we have an opportunity at least to see each other or see the names. For me, it's much easier this way. So what do you think about such kind of practice? Would you be happy about it? Would you have some question marks? Is it really against any regulation? What would be your opinion? I'm really curious to know.
It's definitely a good practice because it's really controlling, the chain of command and controlling the document in terms of making sure if there's any alterations, you've got somebody looking at it at multiple stages, so alterations can be easily found and addressed.
That's one point of view, and yes, that would be an advantage. But imagine that you are conducting, for example, a malaria study, vaccination study, or yellow fever vaccination study, and you have recruited 2,867 participants.
Wow, yeah.
That's reality.
That's a lot, and that's a lot of overhead.
So imagine the frequency of document requests, and the archivist just keeps running in and out, in and out, in and out all the time. Let's think about efficiency and effectiveness and well-spent resources.
Yep. I mean, I still think it's a good process, but it might be a better process for rare disease or studies with less participants.
So yeah, one thing, important thing is, does this process really fits this particular study with the expected number of participants and all the processes behind it? Or is it really creating inefficiencies? Maybe there is an update, or I need to review it because my participant is coming and I want to go back to the previous visit data, and I need to request it from the archivist, but the archivist is busy with 5 other requests.
Right.
I have a comment. So that
Mhm.
wouldn't you also then have to determine their archiving procedure? So you kind of open up another door of things to review. What is their process for archiving records? How are they filed? Because if you're not using a TMF and you're just filing paper records,
Which was the case in that situation in my audit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing is sometimes companies would like to differentiate how to control documents which are still live documents, meaning they are used because the study is active. Different thing is the long-term preservation, when the
Right.
study is over, and there might be a request for a document once in 5 years, maybe not even that. But for live records, if you don't have electronic ones, it really needs some good processes and some good streamline what you can allow, what you should not allow, how to control that, and how to make sure that indeed nothing is lost, because I've seen also live records that were in a space partially separated from a dining area where everybody was coming, including visitors.
Oh,
And
boy.
nothing was locked, and everything was like a heap of files and papers. So you immediately question, can you make sure nothing is lost? Can you make sure nothing has been accessed by unauthorized people? So these are two extremes, I would say, very tight and very loose. So let's try to find a sound balance, which might not be easy, and maybe really depending on the size of the study, the type of the study, the workload, the burden, and the whole way how the site is organized.
If the terminology archive, feels to me, it's once the study is over, that's what you do with the files. You archive them, until they're needed, especially if it's a live study and you get, having an inspector walk in the door. What is your process of pulling those files for an inspector to have access to those records?
Yeah, some companies call it like short-term or live document archive and long-term archive. Yeah. They may outsource even the latter. So I've seen all kinds of variations, but really to have a process that is effective and that is working, and maybe even to keep some flexibility from one project to another, because all our studies are not born the same, and what works perfectly for one may be a hindrance in the other. There are always challenges, and also the way what people learned in previous organizations. But maybe that organization was doing different types of studies, and their focus was different. So the adaptation of a process in my new organization, I don't necessarily copy paste, because my new organization is not a good fit for that process. The process should be fitting the organization and not trying to somehow stick the organization inside a process I've brought from somewhere. Any other thoughts or your own challenges or questions? Also, we have the luck of having Lydia here, and Lydia will be unavailable because of the Quality College stuff next week. So any question you may have for Lydia, take your chance and ask it now.
Hi all, I'm here to answer questions about the logistics of the exam. If you have any questions like that, I won't be able to come to the meeting next week, but I am always available via email if you have a question that comes up and you're not sure how to get an answer to it. You can always reach me at lydia.brunk@sqa.org or simply by using the RQAP@sqa.org email address.
Lydia, I noticed a couple of repeated questions about, I haven't received the decision yet. Have I been accepted? Have I qualified? What is the latest date people should be receiving the response? Do you know?
Yes, we do have applications that are still ongoing review. You will be notified either way if you've been accepted or denied. We say that all applicants will receive a decision by mid-September. That means that ideally you'd be getting a decision by the end of this week, but it may be sometime next week if there are any issues. Applications are reviewed by members of the Council on Professional Registration. And each reviewer has their own process. I mean, the reviews are all the same, but some people like to attack their assigned reviews early. Some people like to wait until the last minute. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything about your application if it's taking longer for it to be reviewed. It just depends on your reviewer's workload and the way they schedule things for their reviews.
Thank you. Yeah, people were getting anxious about that, saying yes, but I don't know. I would like to go and select my test center and book but I can't do it because I don't have a decision, and it was making them feeling very uncertain.
That is unfortunately just the name of the game. It takes some time for these applications to be reviewed.
And yeah, the applications are not only probably from, well, are they limited to SQA, or is it also pooling other organizations?
Anyone can apply for the RQAP exam. You do not need to be a member of SQA. We typically have, I would say, somewhere in the realm of 50 to 70 applications that need to be reviewed over the course of about a month. So it just depends on when your application was submitted and the workflow of the person who is reviewing your application.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that should be at least reassuring that no need to be anyhow anxious or thinking, yeah, that's probably I haven't been accepted because I haven't received a decision. You will receive the decision, this or that. Any other question for Lydia you would like to ask? Anything related to logistics, anything to related, there were some questions related to some kind of support, but I think you cannot bring a dictionary, you cannot use any online dictionary, you may have this additional time, but that's all, and maybe not even pen and paper. You will be provided by something that you can use if you want to make some notes or write or calculate, although there shouldn't be complicated calculations, but you cannot bring your own or use your phone for anything, right?
That's correct. The organization that we partner with, Pearson VUE, which delivers the tests, has pretty strict security rules around the exam. So you won't be able to bring anything in with you. If you are a non-native English speaker, you can request accommodations, English language accommodations at the time that you're submitting your application. And depending on how you're taking the exam, if you're taking it in person, your accommodations would consist of an additional hour of testing time and or the ability to bring a language dictionary with you into the exam. It would need to be new and unmarked. If you're testing via OnView, then you would be able to take 2 additional hours of testing time. Although please be aware that we do not recommend OnView unless there's a compelling reason that it is the best option for you, because it has led in the past to greater rates of technical exam issues for our candidates. There are still plenty of people who test via OnView successfully. We just recommend an in-person testing center because there is a smaller incidence of issues with that. And we continue to offer OnView because it makes the exam more accessible to people who do not live close to a testing center.
Well, one thing, you cannot bring food and drink.
You
And
cannot
for
bring
me,
food.
I need to keep drinking, because if I don't and I get thirsty, my brain starts pausing. But if you need it, if you have, for example, medical reasons, then you need, say, a paper from a doctor, and then there might be exceptions that you can apply for. And potentially, if you change your mind about the additional hour, can it be provided even after the application, Lydia?
Yes, if you need to change something on your application, you'll need to reach out to RQAP@SQA.org. Similar to the language accommodations, we do also accommodate any disability or medical accommodations. For those, you would need to fill out a form that's on the application. The application is closed now, but if you do need accommodations and you did not fill that out, then you will need to reach out to me, RQAP@SQA.org, for that information. Disability or medical accommodations are provided at no cost, but you will need to provide, as Camilla said, a letter from, you'll need to have a form signed by a medical professional to verify that you require these accommodations.
Okay, and we are 1 minute over. Unless there are no urgent questions, we will close this meeting. Lydia, thank you very much for all your continuing support. You are amazing. And without you, it would be very difficult to make it all happen. Thank you all for participating, and wish you still in your remaining time to make it as effective as possible for learning and preparing for the exam. The important thing is stay calm and don't panic. Thank you very much, and see you for the last time for the study group next Thursday.
Since I won't see you, good luck everyone on your exam. I hope everything goes well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.